Welcome back. We actually have a name to our podcast this time. It's no longer the Unnamed Podcast, but it is slightly off brand. So thank you to all of our first time listeners who listened to our first one. We had more than just one download, which means it was more than my mom. So thank you, everyone.
A win's a win.
So today we're going to be talking about another brand, and it's one of the most controversial fashion campaigns of the year. We're going to be talking about American Eagle. So here's what happened. So American Eagle teamed up with actress Sydney Sweeney, and it was one of those back to school pushes. So they launched this campaign in August. They went all out. It was complete with billboards. They did the Sphere takeover in Las Vegas, and they did a ton of social media promotion. The slogan was called Sydney Sweeney Has Great Genes, JEANS. Now, at first glance, the pun was definitely intended to highlight the play on denim. However, they got a little creative and started to play on the word genes, GENES. And there was a campaign where she started talking about how parents pass down traits and genes to their kids. And, she talked about, did she talk about like blonde hair, blue eyes?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. So really, really played onto the genes, GENES side of it. So as you could imagine, that quickly spiraled into backlash, of course. So some of the things that was said about this campaign, first was the racist undertones, right? So having that pun, jeans and jeans, and then the way that the camera really spanned on her blonde hair, blue eyes. It was almost like a celebration of having great genes if you're blonde hair, blue eyes. Someone had said, there was like this viral comment that said this ad would have gone crazy in 1940s Germany. Yikes.
Ooh. It's not what you...
Definitely not. And then, of course, there was it's now deleted video. I'm sure we can find it on YouTube, so we will link it with the show notes. But there was this over-sexualization of how the camera like really panned on her chest. So a lot of critics were saying that they were really catering to the male gaze, which definitely alienated a lot of their core Gen Z female audience. And then there's, just some other things that I had found online. They talked about the political polarization, because apparently Sweeney is embraced by far-right groups. Don't love talking about political things here, but that was definitely one of the things that was said. So it really became this culture war about all the things that went wrong with this particular campaign. So I will say, just, before I pass it off, so they did end up pulling and deleting some of the most criticized videos that they had on there, but they also responded to it. And their response on Instagram was, Sydney Sweeney has great genes, JEANS, is and always was about the genes. Her genes, her story. Will continue to celebrate how everyone wears their AE genes with confidence their way. Great genes look good on everyone. And I will say though, one last thing too, there was that video to where it was like a huge billboard on the street, and it did say Sydney Sweeney has great genes with the GENES, and then that was scratched out, and then it had genes on it. So
yeah,
all
I
right.
saw that one too.
Okay,
Craziness.
guys. So what do we think? What's that gut check? When we talk about this, I've been seeing everybody's facial expressions, so we have a clue in. Yeah, who wants to take it away first?
When I first saw this, it's just that little bit of a cringe moment, right? You're like, oh, you know what I mean? I feel like that was my initial response to it. And then you think about it more and you're like, are there pieces of this that could have worked if not all that whole had come together? But it's kind of hard to say yes to even that. I think it was wrong. And there were a lot of pieces that don't work, and put them together, and the sum is greater than the whole, making it worse.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. Yeah. First initial reaction, I was like, what? What is this? What am I watching right now? Very weird. It doesn't match American Eagle at all. Yeah. Teresa?
When I saw the ad, I was like, this is American Eagle. It felt like a completely different brand. So I agree there. I was shocked to see American Eagle's logo on them.
Yeah, I thought like, did we do creative testing? Did we who let this actually pass?
And I always think that perception is bigger than intentionality. So you can't run around telling everybody, no, this is what we meant. This is what we meant, because it's really about how people perceive it organically. So that was a tough moment where I agree with you, Teresa. I was like, who did we test this against? Did nobody raise any red flags? Because even if that wasn't how it was intended to hit audiences, it did, obviously.
I think with that too, I think that's a good example of how when things don't align with your brand, people are going to interpret the message in whatever way they can. And that's a great example of that, because Sydney Sweeney doesn't have anything to do with American Eagle jeans. And who she is as a person and her brand doesn't align with any of that. So that misalignment definitely carries over into that misinterpretation. Even if that's not what American Eagle intended, that's how it came off.
Well, and as somebody who has shopped at American Eagle, they have kind of a slightly separate brand called Aerie. That's a little bit more like feminine focused, but they were all about body positivity a couple years ago and all about different types of people and different bodies and just a wide variety of people shown in a lot of their ads. And so to see this Sydney Sweeney ad that was a little bit more kind of mainstream, idealistic, it really did feel like a complete 180 from what they were going for a couple years ago. And when we look at some of Sydney Sweeney's previous campaigns, like the Dr. Squatch soap, it does feel very kind of older male intended versus what we would normally think of American Eagle's audience as younger, kind of high school teen purchasers. So I thought that was kind of interesting for her as well.
Yeah, in Francis, to your point, I think that's the challenge that companies and organizations really have to think about is, one, you have to be really careful with puns, right? Anything that leans into, anytime you're leaning into a pun that's going to lean into politics or identity or religion or anything like that, you really have to be careful, because someone's going to interpret it the way that they interpret it. And it's all going to be heavily dependent on, their background, the way that they were brought up, their culture, etc. And so I have this feeling that if they would have done some creative testing with a diverse group of people of all backgrounds, I really feel like this could have been avoided. I really do think someone would have said do we really want to do that? And I did look into, just a little bit about the process. And they did say that American Eagle, they really were not too involved in the creative campaign itself. It was more of, they gave reviews and approvals, but apparently the person that was in charge of this ad was a former creative director of American Eagle, years ago. And it was really all done behind closed doors. And so I think it's really going to change the way that they make their decision making on how they do things moving forward. And I think it's really important that if, as a company, you're going to do any sort of campaign, make sure you run it through a lot of different filters. Let's not keep it behind closed doors with leadership. Let's make sure we get some diversity in there.
And how much more surprising to know that someone who knows the American Eagle brand so well led this charge.
Yeah.
Did anyone see any stories about how other brands responded to this?
Yeah, Francis, you were talking about Katseye, right? With Gap?
Yeah. So I think it was after a month that this Sydney Sweeney ad dropped, Gap did a collaboration with Katseye, and Gap does kind of a music video, dance video every year. I think last year they had Tyla, and the year before that they had Troye Sivan. But this year they had Katseye, which they're an international girl group. They're built on, I think it was a reality TV show, but basically they're very diverse. And in the video, they're dancing to Milkshake by, I should know her name.
That's okay. We all know the song.
We'll link it.
Yes.
It was great.
We'll link it if you don't know, but yes.
You know the song.
You know the song.
Anyway, but yeah, I think that it's become a trend right now. The dance became a trend in itself. And I think that's kind of a good example of what will happen if your campaign matches with your brand, because Gap, they're dancing in jeans. It's comfortable. Y2 and you have a girl group pushing forward for this campaign, and the timing of it was just perfect.
It was so interesting to see their response and see how well it landed. Like that dance you said, Francis, it has been going viral on TikTok. It's like every other video I swipe on is the Katseye trend. And how impressive for them to know their audience that well, that they know that here's a song that we could put a dance to, we could put it on TikTok. And not only is it our ad, but now we're going to create a viral experience for everyone as well.
Mhm.
So my niece actually first told me about that. She just turned 15 last week, and we were talking about the American Eagle campaign, and she, of course, was like all up in arms about it. And she's like, "Oh, but did you see what Gap did? They did this really great viral video of people of all like shapes and sizes and all like just coming together and, doing the video." And she absolutely loved it. And yeah, I watched it, and it was really, really good.
It was well done too. Like the professionality that goes into the dance, like you can tell it was a really well done ad. It had a nice tempo beat. It was very catchy. It's interesting that it had that piece of virality that everybody wants to create, but they did it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of like virality, I feel like, do you guys think that American Eagle chose Sydney Sweeney just for that reason? Just because it'll go viral?
A little bit. And it did go viral, right? But just maybe not in
Probably
the way
for
that
the wrong reason.
that they had intended. We're talking about American Eagle, but maybe not buying their jeans anymore.
I think this goes into, Aaron, something you talked about on the last podcast with Cracker Barrel, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, but we talked about, that risk versus reward, and it raises the question, is all press really good press, or is, this one of those, like they invested millions of dollars, and there was a study done by AdScape who measures things on social media. And I think they said that traffic dropped 9% after this ad went out. Like 9%. That's like from this campaign. So curious to hear, what you think about that.
Ooh, the term all press is good press. I don't know if that hits quite as well anymore. I would say we've definitely gotten into kind of a cancel culture, which I know is a buzzword, but people are going to put their spending actions behind their politics and what they believe. And so it is going to tank your stock. We've seen that with a lot of different companies, that when you make a bad move with your brand, people are going to perceive that as something they don't want to be a part of anymore. So that virality did not work for American Eagle. Sometimes you can go against the status quo, right? You have to think that you're influencing people's actions too. So when you look at taking a risk, sometimes it is like that. And hopefully you take a risk that you can bounce back from. But there's always steps after that too. So kind of what do you need to do after this to bounce back and hit that core audience? Like we said with Cracker Barrel, everything's a learning experience. But the biggest part is if you fail and you don't learn, then you have truly failed. So we want to make sure that whatever next steps we take are going to be in line and learning from what we did previously.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a great question. Yeah. So do we have any kind of like hot takes on this? Did we see anybody else like Katseye that kind of created a response to this? I'm sure if you were a jeans company, you were scrambling to get some ad out that would be kind of in tandem with that. Did we see any other campaigns?
I just thought it was interesting that in most of the articles that I read that we found, there are parallels drawn to the Calvin Klein 1980s jeans ad with Brooke Shields. And I feel like, the controversy, it helped kind of that one for Brooke Shields. It was kind of, big for her, but it ended up being positive. And the big, controversy there was that she was 15 years old. And, that it was like nothing comes between me and my Calvins. And this is a totally different controversy. And it, the question is, do they weigh the same? What do you guys think? Do you think that the weight of a 15-year-old saying that versus kind of all the implications with the Sydney Sweeney ads, do you see the parallels in that side of it?
That's an excellent question.
So I watched the video where they actually interviewed her now as like, I can't remember how old she said she was, like in her 50s. Okay, well, forgive me for I don't know how old she was, but definitely much older. And it's really interesting watching the press that she got back when she was 15 and just how much different press she got, whether it was on the male interviewers versus the female interviewers. Like the female interviewers were very much like a lot more harder on her mom. Like, oh, how could you, let her do these ads at the age of 15? And then like the male interviewers were a lot different. They're like, oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. So, well done. So that was crazy and interesting, I have to say. I do think it's a little bit different on the Sydney Sweeney side because, I mean, she is an adult, so there is that part of it. But I don't, it's interesting. Like, why jeans? Like, why is that the first place that we go? Why is it the jeans ads?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I feel like Sydney Sweeney knows who she is and what she's doing. Like the Dr. Squatch thing, for those who don't know, she advertised a soap that had her bath water in it, and it sold out completely. So, and she's obviously like known for her body and her figure. So I think it does make a difference because she's doing it by her choice. When you compare it to Brooke Shields, who was 15 at the time, she's not making her decisions and she doesn't know the implications it has.
Yeah,
That prefrontal
definitely.
cortex.
Yeah, a fully loaded prefrontal cortex for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of thought it was interesting that people would kind of step into the same territory. I wondered if they had done their research and realized the similarities between the Brooke Shields ad and how controversial that was at the time. And then to turn around and make something that was very similar, I wondered where they thought it could go. Because to me, it was a 50-50 flip of it was either going to very much succeed and bypass the controversy, or it was going to slip back and go even worse for them. So I thought that was interesting. I'd love to see kind of the research and if that was even something they had considered it being so closely tied. Because usually if you're in that industry, in that space, you know the history that came before you. And hopefully you know it well enough that you aren't doomed to repeat it.
So what are the lessons here for like marketers when it comes to doing creative campaigns that are very much like in the public eye, right? I mean, social media heavy, they did the Sphere, they did the billboards, but even like small businesses, like what are some lessons learned that they can take from this?
In design, there's a rule that says if you see it, somebody else will too. So you have to kind of call out the red flags that you see. And if it looks like something that it shouldn't, you really have to make other people aware of it. And it's almost always if you point something out, somebody else is going to see it. And it's so much easier to catch it earlier and not have it run into production versus say, oh, nobody will see that, and then have 100 people down the line that raise that flag and say, hey, this doesn't look quite the way you had intended. So that's just my design perspective on it. You have to say something if something looks a little bit different or could be perceived differently. And I know Frances is nodding with me. We've had those discussions.
I think another one too is, and this ties into some of the things we talked about earlier, particularly choosing her for the campaign, but I think it's really important for brands not to trade short-term buzz for that long-term trust because, going viral, and everyone wants to go viral, right? But it doesn't always translate to sales. And I think, in this particular case, American Eagle did see that 9% drop in store traffic, even though they got millions of views.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to their sister brand, Aerie, they build that long-term equity with that body positivity campaigns, and that grew a lot of loyalty and trust. And so I think, one lesson here is play the long game because buzz will fade just because someone is in the spotlight for their 5 seconds of being popular for 2025. Trust is what compounds. And so I think that's really, really important is be careful if you are going for that viral moment because you could go viral for the wrong reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys think that they considered their target audience at all? Because most of their audience are teenagers.
I'm going to say too, like this is another really important thing. Like you gotta pre-test your creative with those diverse audiences, and in particular, like your audience too. They relied on approval from these executives that were behind closed doors. And I think sometimes what might feel clever, because again, we're going for that viral moment with, this really popular actress who's really landing a lot of roles. I think it's very different than how it's going to land with the public sometimes. And so I think that goes into like what you're asking, Francis. You have to test the message like across different racials, gender, cultural groups, etc.
Mhm.
They could have even done quick digital surveys or any sort of like social listening, before the launch to understand how that language could be interpreted.
And doesn't Catseye's commercial just symbolize how much more listening to your audience helps your brand than going with the streamlined person that is the spokesperson of the year? Like the fact that it even went viral and is still out there, still being circulated is huge. So congrats to Gap for that one. That was a really good example of listening to your audience and following what their needs would be. And honestly, if you showed that ad to the Gap board of executives, they may not have connected with it or resonated with it, but it's because it's for your audience that you're trying to sell to. So it's really hard to make those decisions when you're not in that space. But that's why, like Teresa said, you have to listen and put feelers out there to make sure that what you're putting out there is going to hit with your audiences.
No, absolutely. I feel like Gap as well, like they were kind of falling out of fashion, but
Completely.
this kind of brought them back. I mean, they had like past like resurgence, but it's not as big as like right now, which is kind of crazy. Like this one ad did that for them.
Yeah. I mean, how many times had you heard Gap in like a high school or middle school setting, right? Like Gap jeans, you've heard Abercrombie, American Eagle, like those other brands, but now they're in it, and that's really cool swing for them.
Yeah, no, Gap is like the sweatshirt I would find at the thrift store.
Yes,
And now they're probably gonna
exactly.
go back in style.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, all Gap stuff is going to be way expensive now, way sought after, especially vintage stuff.
For the love, please do not avoid double meanings that are tied to identity. Can we just not do wordplay that touches on anything related to race or body type or genetics? Like, I feel like that would be an obvious one, but
Yes.
apparently not, because it will have unintended consequences. And I think one thing I read on one of the interviews on the Gap side with Katseye is they said, like, the jeans move with me. That was, like, one of the things that they were saying in that video, which was super interesting. So I thought that was a really good comeback. And I think it was definitely a response and a little bit of a jab to America.
Have you guys seen the Beyonce Levi's ad? Do we have any thoughts on that?
I didn't see it.
She's been their spokesperson for a little bit with Cowboy Carter, which makes perfect sense. Like, if you could get Beyonce to do anything for your brand, you would probably say yes. It's kind of interesting. Their ads always feel like it's telling a story. Like one time she's at the laundromat, one time she's playing pool. It feels very Western vibes. I think audience-wise, it's kind of interesting because Levi's jeans, it's kind of like Gap that they're switching. I always thought of Levi's as like Wranglers, like older men would probably buy Levi's jeans and wear them. But she kind of shifted that image and pointed it towards a younger audience. So yeah, I think it's an interesting move. I think they did come out with an ad, I think, right after American Eagle and all of this went down, but they had been doing it for so long beforehand that I feel like it kind of was just the undercurrent of a lot of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think theirs is definitely more of a controversial, at the moment, whenever that happened, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, after Sydney Sweeney, nothing is controversial now in the jeans world. Like, they really just took that airspace for a little while.
They did.
Poor American Eagle.
And plus, I would say Beyonce is very safe with her image as well. Like,
Correct.
She knows her brand, she knows her target demographic, and she's not somebody who would do something like that risky. I feel like for her, it's like, pretty much everything is like successful. I mean, she is Beyonce.
I mean, Francis, I think you just nailed that.
Yeah.
Know your brand, know your audience.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the laundromat ad, it's kind of the play on the Levi's laundromat ad from like the 80s, right? That was kind of famous, where it was like, like the quintessential who you think of Levi's, but the attractive version, right? A guy takes off his Levi's in the laundromat to wash them or whatever. And so it's kind of that like, oh, Cowboy Carter. Now I'm doing it. Like I'm doing the same thing in 2025 or whenever that one was launched.
That's so cool. Yeah, I forgot that's like a call out to the old one.
Callback.
Yeah. Callback, yeah.
Oh, either one. No, that's what I was thinking. Like I was not familiar with that, so that's good that you had that knowledge.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like kind of a famous like Levi's. I think it was the risque, like he's kind of stripping down in the laundromat or that kind of thing, and especially back in the 80s. Here we are again with our controversial jeans ads, right?
We'll put a clip
That's
right
so
here,
funny.
somewhere in here.
Yeah, yes, we'll let you guys see it. One thing that I just thought of is it's really hard for the brands that had success with Sydney Sweeney. I mean, she had such a track record going. Like, she was that person that was going to get you a lot of things. Like, I mean, the Dr. Squatch soap sold out. She's been a part of a lot of success recently. And so it's hard to imagine that having her in an ad wouldn't lead to success like Beyonce. So I know character-wise, it's tough that they made that choice that maybe would have gone against their brand in favor of somebody who is on the ramp to fame and success.
Yeah. Well, I think to wrap this one up, so I think such great comments, I think that came about this particular campaign. But to sum it up, I think marketers and businesses and companies and brands, et cetera, some of those lessons: test your creative, especially with diverse audiences, avoid those double meanings that are tied to anything, like I said, like race, body type, genetics. Steer clear from that. Know and understand that different audiences are going to remix your message. Even though you intended it a certain way, they might perceive it a little bit differently. And really try not to trade that short-term virality for that long-term. And I think at the end of the day, this campaign shows us that creativity without that cultural awareness is definitely a huge risk and definitely a gamble. So if you do want to stand out, make sure that the story you're telling reflects the values that your audience already believes you stand for. And Francis, that's what you said. I mean, so simply, know your audience and know your brand. So I think if companies just keep that in mind, they should keep out of the spotlight for the wrong reasons. All right. Well, that is it for today.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back soon.